Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Miss.
I'll be your assessor for today. My name is Mrs. Bianca Supat Pennant. May I have your name, please?
Mr. Richards.
Mr. Richards and
Trivia White.
Mr. White. Okay, so this is what we refer to as the initial part of the assessment. So I'm here today just to get a feel from you guys to let you know what will be expected of you and also some of the things that you should expect from me as an assessor. Okay, so I want to also share with you before we go into anything else the particular standard that we will be looking at today as it regards to your assessment, just to ensure that what we're giving you today is what you were taught. Okay, is that okay?
Yes, Miss.
Okay, so let me share with you the standard that we're going to be looking at. Just to ensure that we're looking at the same thing, does it say carry out measurements and calculations?
Yes, Miss.
Yes. And there are particular elements that we're seeing just below that, and those are referred to our element of competence. Are you seeing that?
Yes, Miss.
Alright, so we have some main ones here that we want to highlight, the obtained measurements and how we estimate approximate quantities. Are you seeing those?
Yes, Miss.
Okay, are you able to read it for me? Just browse over it. Finished? Any questions?
No questions.
No questions? Okay, are the elements familiar to you?
Yes, Miss. Very proud.
Alright, very good. So I want to draw your attention to the next page, and we're going to look at that's page 2. Can you come for me, please? I want to look at the critical aspects of evidence. Alright, so we have some listed here, and these are the main things that we want to focus on today. So I'm going to go through them for you. Communicate effectively to enable accurate calculations and measurements, demonstrate effective use of measuring devices, accurate measurements taken and recorded, perform simple calculations to specifications, and estimate quantities and costs to requirements. Are we seeing those?
Yes, Miss.
Those are the things that we want to highlight today. Okay? But before we go into the assessment process itself, I want to find out from you guys if you have any special requirements for me as the assessor. Any special needs that you have?
Just for the font size to be bigger and that it is printed properly.
Okay, so bigger font on the paper, not a problem.
Same
From you, same for you? Okay, no problem. Now, before we actually do anything else, I want to allow you guys to know that today we're looking at competence. And it doesn't mean that you're a failure. Currently in our system, you're competent or you're not competent, right? At the end of the process, I'm going to indicate that to you, and that is your right. So depending on how you perform, that is what I will say to you. However, I want you to be aware that if it is that you're not pleased with my assessment or you disagree, you have the right to appeal it at the office if you don't agree with my assessment. If you feel that you did very well and I did not make you competent, you can go and appeal it and we can move on from there. Outside of that, if you were found not to be competent and you are in agreement, I want to let you know that at the institution, we have sessions for you to be reassessed. So it's not the end of the world. We can do our best and come again. Alright? Do we have any questions on that?
No questions.
No questions? Okay. I also want to bring to your attention that you're required to do a written paper. And I want to show it to you here now. And you can browse through it for me before we actually go into the paper. It should be the same competency standard at the beginning. Are you seeing that on the paper?
Yes.
Units to be assessed, is that? Okay. Any more questions?
No questions.
Good. All right. So, in the normal process, you have to do the paper first before we do the actual practical part of it. So this paper, you're going to do it for me in the allotted time, and the allotted time is on the paper. After which, we will collect what the paper is, and I will come back to you guys again another time to do the practical assessment, okay? After which, we will follow up with some questions, some feedback, anything that we weren't clear on, just to ensure that you would have done your best in this assessment, okay? So you're gonna do the paper for me now. Start, go ahead. All right, you're finished with the paper? Thank you. So this will also be a part of your feedback. So how was the paper? It was good?
It was manageable.
It was manageable? That's very nice to hear. So you guys will see me again later on for the practical side of the assessment, okay? So thank you so much for your participation in this aspect of it, and I'll see you guys later. Okay? I forget, we're gonna have a technical person later on just to ensure that the assessment process it is fair and it is up to industry standards. You guys are treated fairly, and my own personal opinion will not affect you in any way as regards to you being competent. Okay? So don't be alarmed when you see the individual in the room, okay? Alright, and that's it. So I'll see you guys later on, okay? Alright, good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
How are we doing this afternoon? Really? Okay. That's wonderful. So again, I'm back. We should consider the same. I hope after the assessment you'll be able to say the same. Okay? So I am back now, and as mentioned earlier, we're here for the practical part of your assessment. Now before we begin, I want to introduce to you our special person within the field. I mentioned that she'll be here today, and this is our technical individual. Basically, she'll be making sure that what I am saying and doing is accurate to what you guys should know or should be competent in. Okay? So with that said, I want to now go over the practical tasks with you guys. I'll read it. I'm going to give it to look at while I'm reading it so we can follow along and you can ask any questions that you might have. For this aspect, it's very important that you ask your questions ahead of time, because once I begin the process, you won't be able to ask me any questions. It's whatever is done is what I will have to grade. Okay, we're clear on that? Okay, so let's look at the assessment itself. Now it's quite a mouthful, so let us try to follow along. Alright, so the manager of a vocational training institution has embarked on giving one of her classrooms a facelift. For this cause, she asks you to estimate the cost to tile the room. And below here, we have a couple objectives that we want to go through for the practical. So the first one, identify at least 3 aspects of this project that will impact the estimated cost. Next, given that the floor of the room to be tiled is rectangular shaped, name an appropriate measuring tool that can be used to carry out the required measurements. Then you're going to demonstrate how to actually use a tool that you have indicated to me in the first part of that question, okay? So part C now, explain how would you determine the number of tiles that would be required to completely tile the room, and from that you're going to estimate the cost of the number of tiles that will be needed. And lastly here, we're going to determine the cost of the number of tiles needed to tile the room, what additional charge may be considered before estimating the overall cost to tile the room. We're following along with that? Alright, at the back of the paper, I want you to indicate that you're seeing the rubric. Next page. And this is what we're going to use to actually mark you, so you can look at it just to see if there is any level of fairness to you guys as we're going through the assessment process. What you see here, nothing will change, meaning that I will not cheat you out of your assessment. What we have here is what you will be graded on, okay? So look at the rubric. Any questions on the rubric?
No questions.
No questions? Okay, so just to indicate to you guys as well, during the assessment, I'll be, looking at what you're doing, being observant, taking my marks as we're going through. After which we have another segment, so you can prepare yourself for that, which you will be given the feedback from this. Okay, so you won't be left in the dark, alright? So we're going to get into the practical aspect of it now. Okay, so good afternoon again, Mr. Richards. So we're back now for the practical part of your assessment, right? Your colleague is in the waiting area, so you will be going first, okay? So I'm going to read to you again again the practical scenario, and we're going to go through some questions and followed by the demonstration. Okay? Alright, so the manager of a vocational training institution has embarked on giving one of her classrooms a facelift. For this cause, she asked you to estimate the cost to tile the room. So here are the different aspects. So question for you before we get into the demonstration. Could you identify for me at least 3 aspects of this project that will impact the estimated cost?
So the factors would be the size of the room, the length and width of the tile, and the labor cost.
Okay, alright. That's a problem. Next, given that the floor of the room to be tiled is rectangular shaped, name an appropriate measuring tool that can be used to carry out that required measurement.
Tape measures.
A tape measure? Okay. Alright, now that you have identified for me your desired tool, we're going to go ahead and demonstrate the usage of the tool to give us various measurements for the room. That's okay? Alright, so here we have. So I'm going to now stand aside and watch you work, okay?
And 17 feet and 2 inches.
Okay.
$285 feet and 10 inches.
Okay, thank you. Now using those measurements, right? I want to ask you some follow-up questions, okay?
Yes, sir.
So explain to me how you determine the number of tiles that will be required to completely tile the room.
Divide the measurement of the room by the measurement of the tiles.
Okay. And the cost of the number of tiles needed, how would you determine that?
Because the cost of the tiles needed.
Don't remember? That's okay. Alright. We'll move on. So lastly, after determining the cost of the number of tiles needed to tile the room, what additional charge must we consider before estimating the overall cost of the tile to tile the room?
I think the waste factor will not be taken into consideration.
The waste factor? Okay. Any additional charges?
The labor costs.
Labor costs? Okay. Alright, thank you so much, Mr. Richards, for your participation in this assessment. I will speak to you later on as regards the overall performance, okay? Thank you. Good afternoon again, Mr. White. How are we this afternoon? Wonderful to hear. Now we're back for the practical part of the assessment that I had mentioned earlier. So I'm going to read it to you again, and we're going to go ahead and ask some questions and the demonstration. Okay? So, the manager of a vocational training institution has embarked on giving one of her classrooms a facelift. For this cause, she asks you to determine the cost to have the room. First question for you now. Identify at least 3 aspects of this project that will impact the estimated costs.
We need the area of the room, the area of the tile, and also labor costs.
Labor costs. Okay. Given that the floor of the room to be tiled is rectangular shaped, name an appropriate measuring tool that can be used to carry out the required measurements.
A measuring tape.
Measuring tape would be ideal. Okay. Now from your response, I'm going to now ask you to go ahead and demonstrate the usage of the measuring tape to calculate, well, not to calculate, but to get a measurement of the various dimensions of the room. Okay? All right. Value?
The value is 24 feet. The length is 24 feet. And the width is 220 inches.
Alright, thank you. So, to pick you up from that part of the demonstration, I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, okay?
Yes.
So firstly, explain how you would determine the number of tiles that would be required to completely tile the room.
First, you will divide the area of the room by the area of the tile.
Alright. Next question. Then how would you determine the cost of the number of tiles needed?
The cost of the number of tiles, you would, the cost of one tile times the number of tiles needed.
Okay. And lastly, after determining the cost of the number of tiles needed to tile the room, what additional charge must be considered for estimating the overall cost of tile the room?
You should take into consideration the labor costs that would be needed to tile the room.
Labor costs, right? Okay, Mr. White, thank you so much for today, and I will see you later on to give you a feedback on the process. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Okay, good afternoon again, Mr. White. How are you feeling now after the assessment process?
I'm feeling confident that I passed with my marks.
Really? That's good to hear. That's very good to hear. So before we even get into that, I want to go over some of the different aspects of the assessment that we did that will bring you to your final score. Okay? So first thing I want to look over the internal test paper that you were given. I must say that you did exceptionally well on the paper. There was only one question that I found that you may have misinterpreted the question, and I want to just point it out to you. It was question 2. Now for this particular question, you were given some measurements, right? However, at the ending of the question, they were asking you for a totality, giving you a waste factor. So what I realized is that you misinterpreted the question to believe that every single measurement you would have a waste factor. Right? So instead of just calculating the measurements as we're given, you did a waste factor for every single measurement, and that would have pulled down your answer, which is where you fell down on that particular question. Right? But the rest of the paper was done pretty well, so I must commend you for that, for being able to put what you know on paper. Right? Alright, so let's move on now to the practical part of what you did. Now, how do you think that you did on the practical?
I think I did very well.
Very well. Alright, so I must agree with you. It was properly carried out. Looking at you and looking at the rubric, some of the things that I was looking for, I found almost no fault, and that's very good, right? So that when you go into the industry, you are properly trained, right? So let's discuss some of the things that you were tested on. So you were asked to state some aspects of the project that will impact the estimated cost. And based on your responses, I would have given you full marks for that aspect of it, right? Apart from that, you were asked to identify an appropriate measuring tool, which you did correctly. So you also received the full marks for that part of it. And using that particular tool now to give us a measurement, looking at what you did with the various measurements, your ability to use the measuring tape correctly and to actually record your responses correctly, you were also given the full marks for that aspect as well. Now, using your knowledge from what you did for the demonstration, you were asked further questions, correct? Alright, and also based on those responses, can you calculate cost, totality, state additional charges, anything, and the number of tiles that will be needed for the entire room, for the number of tiles. You also were competent in that area depending on your answer. Right, so I would have given you the full marks for your practical assessment, making you competent in that area as well. So therefore, you were found competent in both the practical tasks and both your written activity. Right, so overall, I would have given you competency for this exercise. Are you in agreement with this?
Very much so.
Very much so. That is very nice to hear. Right now, I'm going to encourage you that even though you did well on the paper, that there's always room for improvement as you continue within this general construction course, right? And because you did so well, I'm going to encourage you to not only stop here, but once you're finished, try to do further studies just to improve yourself to give you a better chance, right?
Yes.
But I'm very pleased with what you did today, and I can tell that when you do go into the industry, you will be a force to be reckoned with. Okay, Mr. White? Okay, so thank you so much for your time. And for your certification, you can always speak to the office as they regard such. Okay? Alright, thank you. Okay, so good afternoon again, Mr. Richards.
Good afternoon.
How are you feeling after the assessment?
Quite nervous.
Quite nervous? Why are you nervous?
For the feedback.
For the feedback? Don't worry, man, it's a part of the process, right? So you did two things for me mainly today, even though you were asked one question as well, but mainly for your written paper and for the practical. So let us discuss it. For the test paper, I must say that you did very well on the test paper, right? And I'm gonna get back to this afterwards. One of the main questions that I saw that you had some problems with was number 2. For this particular question, you were given some measurements, you can look at it to remember, but you were also given a waste factor. And what I suspect is that you would have calculated waste factor for each measurement, and so that would have thrown off your entire calculation. right? So it was a mistake where you got confused, but I realized that was a problem, so that is why the question was incorrect. The rest of the paper was properly done. So I would have found you to be quite competent in this different aspect of the exam. Alright? So let us move on now to your practical task. Now for this area, I must say that I recognized quite a few faults in this part of it. Quite a few. So we're gonna go through them, and of course you do know that even after going through it, if you're not in agreement, you can always go and appeal. And if you are in agreement, we will give you opportunities to redo. Alright, so you won't be left in the dark. Now, when you were going through some of the oral questions, right? The first question to state three aspects of the project, I found you to be quite competent in that question. Didn't have any issues there. You identified the measuring tool correctly, which was the measuring tape, so that was also good. But when you went now to demonstrate the usage of the measuring tape, you did not do that quite correctly, right? In some instances, the tape was twisted, so that would have given you some issues as to properly calculate, and then some of your units were quite incorrect, so you were mixing up the feet with the inches. While I assume that it was just an innocent mistake, you understand that within the field we take it as you give it to us, right? So I had to also mark you down for that aspect of it. Also, for the question we're asked you to explain how you determine the cost of the tiles needed, you would have indicated that you don't remember how to actually work out that, right? And that would have also indirectly affected the last question, which would have asked you to determine other factors, in which you would have said to me labor cost, which would also be sufficient for the exam, but stating that you did not know how to calculate in the real world, that would have given us some issues as we seek to continue the process, right? And so because of that, I would have given you a rating of, seeing here, 6 out of 10, right? So in this area, you will have to be competent, right? Now, having gone through it with you, do you have any questions?
Could you read the second to last question about how would I conduct the measurement of the work?
Yes. Yes, so the demonstration. That will be the demonstration how you would have conducted it. So we have spoken about that and some of the issues that we found. Right, but as I said to you, it's not the end of the world. We can give you more opportunities to come again and to master, because you did not entirely fail. You were competent in the written, but not in the practical. So we do understand that we have students that sometimes they can put it on paper, but when it comes to the feeling of it and the real world, they have a problem. So how do we rectify this? I can encourage you to do more practice. Practice makes perfect. So the more you use the tool, is the better you're going to become at actually using the tool and reading the tool, because we're depending on your reading to move ahead with the process, right? Good. So those are my commentations. And again, here you're given opportunity to redo it. So any issues, any concerns after this, you can always let us know. If I'm not here, you can direct them to the office and we can see how best we can work them out. Okay? But again, Ms. Director, thank you for your time today for the assessment, and I wish you the best in future assessments to come. Alright?